Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program. I'm Sydney Ross, Outdoor Education Manager for Deep Roots, and I'm excited to be here with you for the August installment of Lunch and Learn series. Our dear friend and host, Chris Cardwell, was part of the MR340 race on the Big Muddy, so I'll be stepping in to host today. I did hear that the race was unfortunately, yet understandably, canceled due to dangerous conditions on the river, lots of debris and rising water. So I hope everyone had a great time on the river despite this and are drying off in the warmth of their homes now. Before I talk about today's program and introduce our speaker, I want to make a few announcements. First of all, we're incredibly grateful to you for your participation in our webinars and programs. We take pride in creating personalized educational content for viewers like you. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Deep Roots website very soon. You will receive an email with a link into all the resources in today's mentioned broadcast. So watch your email and website. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll be the first to know every time we upload a video. During the program, please put your questions in the Q&A, and I will use this to ask questions to Sarah during the program. And if there's any links that she shares, I'll include them here in the chat as well. Today, we'll be discussing a much anticipated list of native plants that was curated with the beginning gardener in mind. The Sweet 16 most likely to succeed native plants list was created by a group of experts with the beginning gardener in mind. This group who put together the list included native plant growers and landscape specialists. I was one of the few that was part of this conversation, and I will say it did get heated at times. I will never forget you, Wild Sweet William. Obviously, we couldn't add all of our favorite plants to this list, but today we'll be discussing the ones that were chosen for their accessibility, broad ability to support wildlife, and ease of maintenance in mind. Now, many of you are familiar with today's speaker as she helped shape Deep Roots into the organization that it is today. But for those who don't, Sarah Beier grew up exploring plants and their attendant wildlife in the Northeast plains of Kansas. She spent her earliest memories in a small cabin outside of Topeka, where she grew an affinity for trail walking and bug catching. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Wildlife Biology from Missouri State University in 2006 and has been engaged in the worlds of science and education ever since. After 5 wonderful years with Deep Roots, Sarah opened up Oak and IO, serving the KC community as a native landscape consultant, designer, and educator. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of bringing my dear friend and native plant nerd, Sarah Beier, to the virtual table, where we will go in depth with each plant featured on the Sweet 16 list. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. We're so happy for you to be here.
Hi, Sydney. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, this is such a fun one.
I know, I can't wait. I'm so pumped. I know our viewers are excited. But before we begin, I think there's this little known fact that Sarah, you had an interesting side gig back in college. Now, can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, so I was like in the hip hop world. I was a native plant themed rapper. And so a lot of people don't know this, but I went by DJ Little Blue Stem, and it was kind of a crazy couple of years.
Wow, that sounds wild. I don't know if I've ever heard of DJ Little Blue Stem.
Well, I was mostly underground.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sydney.
We're so looking forward to your presentation. And again, folks, if you have questions, please pop those into the Q&A tool. Otherwise, I will be sharing some different links with you all in the chat. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sydney. All right, let's get into it. So I am not actually a successful recording artist, nor am I an unsuccessful recording artist. But as Sydney said, I am a lifelong lover of nature. I'm a Missouri Master Naturalist volunteer, native plant geek, bird nerd, bug enthusiast, all of which combine to make me a very happy, if not particularly fast hiker. So that's a little about me. I am thrilled to be here sharing the Sweet 16 list with you. As Sydney said, this was a process that took several months, kind of culminating in a lunchtime knockdown, drag out brawl to see which 16 would win. So we have them here, and I am excited to go through them with you. We'll talk a little bit about the selection criteria. Sydney already mentioned this a bit. So first of all, these are plants that are going to be generally available at area native plant nurseries. For best results, do try to shop at nurseries that sell only native plants for the ease of finding most of these. They are easy to manage, so not a lot of fussiness here in order to keep them looking good and doing well. We'll talk a little bit about the Chelsea chop, which you may want to do on a few of these species. They play well with others. Nothing here is going to overwhelm your garden with seedlings or runners or anything like that. And nothing here is going to succumb to some friendly competition from neighbors either. So not a lot of shrinking violets in this bunch. They do tolerate a wide or wider range of soil, sun, and moisture conditions, so they're more likely to be successful in a wider variety of yards. They have broad wildlife and pollinator engagement because we want our gardens to be functional and not just pretty. They also have a lengthy bloom time or multiple seasons of interest because we do want our gardens to be pretty, and that's okay too. And they're approachable for new native plant gardeners. So the bottom line question that was asked of participants in this group is basically like, would you recommend this plant for a brand new native plant gardener? And so here are the results. Here's the first look at our Sweet 16 most likely to succeed native plants. So we'll go through each of these in detail. We have started with a grouping of 4 plants, and we'll kind of go through these in groups of 4 that have been combined together for an extended season of blooms, for their ability to be happy in similar conditions. So our first group is called the long season. So this is going to give us blooms and structural interest starting in May with our earliest blooms all the way through November, and then plenty of winter interest as well. So this is just a fabulous group of plants with a lot of wildlife support. So some of the species that we talk about today are going to be familiar faces to you. Some are probably going to be plants that you may never have heard of before. But purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea, is surely one that you're familiar with. This is one of the most widely cultivated plants out there. So we have a nice long bloom time with purple coneflower, blooming June through August. It thrives in full sun to medium shade, and it's going to attract all kinds of wildlife. So you have butterflies and pollinators, you have small little pollinating flies, you have bumblebees. After the blooms fade, we have birds like our American goldfinch that flock to these seed heads to eat the seeds. This is just a wonderful plant. One of the participants of the in that lunch, that group, I think called this a centerfold for native plant, or centerfold for native pollinators. So I thought that was funny, and they really do come to it a lot of generalist pollinator support here. One thing to note with purple coneflower, there are many cultivars available. This plant has a lot of variability sort of naturally in its profile, and humans have taken that and kind of run with it. Some of those cultivars have little to no wildlife value. So if you want to know more about cultivars and why it matters, please check out Deep Root's website, or Sydney can maybe pop a link into the chat at some point. But we'll just mention that so that you're aware of it and you can make informed decisions. I encourage finding the true native species, which should not be difficult to do here, but particularly if you're shopping at a conventional nurseries. For some of these, you'll want to watch out for cultivars and just kind of know the difference and know why it matters, and know what you're wanting to buy. Next up is lanceleaf coreopsis, or Coreopsis lanceolata. Coreopsis is a genus of keystone plants. If you're familiar with Doug Tallamy's work on species that are beneficial for wildlife in keystone plants, we're looking at plants that support some specialist specialist relationships. So either plants that are providing a lot of support for specialist pollinators, those are pollinators that only visit a few types of flowers, or they're providing support for Lepidoptera, for butterflies and moths to lay their eggs on, and for the caterpillars to use as a host plant to eat the tissues of the plant. So keystone species are ones that provide good support in one or both of those categories. And so Coreopsis actually is one of our higher keystone genera. This is the plural of genus. Coreopsis is a keystone genus for the Great Plains region. So it is an earlier bloomer. We're going to have blooms starting in May, probably going for about 6 weeks or so. As you can see in the picture here, we have some that are just budding out, some that have already faded. You can deadhead these or take off the faded blooms if you'd like. I really never bother and I allow it to reseed itself gently. This is a nice one in that it will sort of gently fill in around other plants, but again, it's not going to take over the place, and it's not going to really outcompete anything either. So we do have butterfly and pollinator support. You can get some birds visiting to eat the seeds later in the season, but just a really nice way to kind of start off the blooms here. And the foliage looks nice even when it's not blooming as well. Next, we have aromatic aster, Symphyotrichum oblongifolium. This is another keystone genus for the Great Plains region. So our asters are really important, again, with some of those specialized relationships. So this is going to extend that long season into October, November. By the time these flowers are opening up, there just isn't a lot else that's blooming. It's a really nice contrast with the purple and those sort of greenish, grayish blue leaves that contrast really well with plants around them that are turning their fall colors, that have yellows and browns that are coming out as the season winds down. So lots of late season support, lots of little pollinators. Do get some butterflies nectaring. It also supports some caterpillars. And then for management on aromatic aster, we're going to want to Chelsea chop this plant. And so if you're a longtime viewer of either Lunch and Learn or Native Plants at Noon, that's a phrase you may have heard before, but in case not, Chelsea chop just refers to cutting back a plant by 1/2 to 1/3 earlier in the season. So generally these are plants that tend to bloom later, maybe that tend to get a little tall and leggy. And so by doing the Chelsea chop, we are promoting a couple of things. So first of all, it's going to promote some bushiness, which aromatic aster already has that sort of habit already. And we're going to encourage that by doing a little cutback, because each place that we cut is going to sprout in multiple directions generally. So that helps to keep it a little more compact, helps to reduce the overall height, and may help to get us more flowers as well. Again, you know, when the cut happens and then it grows back in multiple directions, then you have multiple opportunities for flowers as well. So it's called the Chelsea chop because as a sort of a mnemonic for gardeners to remember to do this around the time of the Chelsea flower show in England, which occurs in May. So something to help you remember there. You can chop this one. I actually do May and then sometimes again in June as well, to just take it back a little bit more and really bush it up. So that is one thing you can do with that. Next, side oats, grandma. So it is time to sing the praises of grasses in the native plant garden. Grasses do so much for both design-wise, functionally, aesthetically. They're going to provide competition below ground and support above ground that helps our native plants thrive, particularly our prairie species. They are well adapted to growing in close competition with grasses. They are excellent for winter interest. They provide that like heft and oomph so that there is really something to look at there in the winter. They give context to the seed heads of things like coneflowers or black-eyed Susans that are still standing at the time that the grasses sort of put on their big summer growth and start to get their seed heads later in the year. So specifically looking at side oats, grandma here, Buchelloa curtipendula. This is a nice compact prairie grass. It's a lot of prairie personality in a small package, just getting to about 24 inches. And that's mostly in the bloom or the seed head, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Again, full sun to light shade, dry to average conditions. So we do get some birds eating the seeds. We have some host plant support as well. So side oats get a really nice fall color. You want to leave this standing through the winter, and then you can give it a cut back in like late February, early March before it starts to put on that new growth in the spring. It stays short during the spring, so it's really nice companion for some shorter blooming spring species. It gives them the chance to shine before it sort of grows taller. So this picture here is kind of toward the end of the season, going into fall. We've got the seed heads there sort of hanging off the side. And then here is an earlier color with this sort of nice blue-green. And here is a picture of the blooms. So grasses do bloom. We don't often think about it because they are generally wind pollinated, so they don't need to be flashy to attract insect pollinators or anything like that. But I think this is really pretty. So just really nice details and really nice context for other plants in the garden too. So this brings us to our first design. I have put together for each of these 4 groups a design as a jumping off point for beginners, or if you just need some ideas about how to put these plants together. I hope these can be helpful for you. So we'll go through each one. So here we have the long season. We're going to start off in the spring. We have the side oats grandma staying short. We've got lance leaf coreopsis blooming May through June. And then as that fades, we're going to give way to the purple coneflower show. They are taller, so I have them placed in the middle. And then the aromatic aster around the sides, we're going to chop it to keep it kind of nice and bushy so it can sort of bookend the design there. This is designed to be full sun to part shade. This is designed to be viewed from any direction. So that's part of why we have sort of shorter species around the edges all the way around, and then the taller species in the middle. If you were to just carve out a little bit of your lawn to make a pollinator garden or a native plant garden, this is what that might look like. So we have the winter interest here from the purple coneflower seed heads. We've got the late blooms of the aromatic aster that are blooming as that side oats is turning its fall colors. So just a really nice group of plants here. And so I really like these groupings that Deep Roots has organized the Sweet 16 list into. And so I kind of looked at this and I thought, like, this is really good, but I think we could make it a little better. So I'm also going to offer for each of these an expanded design. If you just want to, add some additional species in the future, or if you just want some ideas of what else could go well with this. So we'll take our long season. And I'm going to suggest that we start the season a little bit earlier. So my first nomination to join the long season group is another from our Sweet 16 list that we'll talk about in a little bit. So Pussy Toes and Purple Poppy Mallow are both Sweet 16 members of the Sweet 16 list. And so just briefly about my inclusion here, Pussy Toes is going to start that bloom a little earlier in April. And it's also going to be a ground cover fill in between the plants, help decrease our weeding. And then Purple Poppy Mallow is going to bloom around the same time as the coreopsis, so a nice companion bloom there, and another shorter species that can kind of mingle in around the grasses. And then I went off book. And I picked some things that are not on the Sweet 16 list. And so I want to share those with you. And for some of these sort of extra plants, I'll talk a little bit about why they may not have made the Sweet 16 list. So first of all, I'm going to suggest that we add gray goldenrod. This is another really important keystone genus for the Great Plains region. It's going to fill in with a bloom August to September. There's not really a lot happening in this group of plants during that time. So in that late season, as the side oats is starting to bloom and to change color, then we're going to have this goldenrod as a companion for it. And then I'm also going to add rose verbena. Rose verbena 100% belongs in a planting called the long season. But I have some caveats on it just because rose verbena is like this, like your really fun but kind of flaky friend. So it will almost always do well its first year. It is short. It has these like mountains of blooms in the spring. And then particularly if you deadhead it or pinch off the faded flowers, you can get blooms on rose verbena through like September, sometimes even see, one or two later than that. So it smells amazing. I do get down on my hands and knees to smell this plant. But it cannot be counted on. It is the flaky friend. So it may come back next year. It probably won't come back where you planted it. But if you get lucky and this plant is happy in your yard, you're going to be really happy. So it's a bit of a gamble, and I totally understand why it didn't make the list. But I think it's worth trying. And if it's happy in your yard, like I said, you'll be happy. If it's not, take the loss, go visit the Discovery Center. So here we have the longer season. So again, we start with the earliest blooms. We're looking at the pussy toes. We put those around the edges because they are shorter. We want to make sure to be able to appreciate them in their first year as a ground cover. It is going to move all around the planting. And I would actually recommend maybe even picking up more than the 7 that I have listed here on the design and just dotting them throughout, because they will, again, they're blooming before most of these other plants are really have emerged very much. So they can be in the middle, even though they're a shorter plant, because we're still going to get to see them. And again, they're going to help cut down on our weeding. So they'll be very happy here. We've still got the side oats to give the planting that sort of grassy context, that winter interest. We've got lanceolate coreopsis and the purple poppy mallow planted together. We're trying rose verbena in like 3 places and crossing our fingers that she'll want to stick around, and hopefully she will do that. And then I placed the gray goldenrod next to the purple coneflower, so we're keeping the tallest things in the middle, and just going to kind of let everybody mingle around. And have this really nice longer season where you've got things in bloom starting April all the way through November. Hey, Sydney.
Hey, that is so, Sarah, I just have to say, this is so beautiful and awesome. And I'm already in love with this presentation. I thought this could be a good moment to answer just a couple topical questions.
Sure, let's do it.
So you kind of already touched upon how to maintain the aromatic asters, but we had someone mention, someone asking about it. So just if you could just reiterate some of the maintenance techniques that you have mentioned about this.
Sure. Yeah. So the Chelsea chop that you can do on aromatic aster, lots of goldenrods benefit from that. Basically, generally, it's going to be done with species that bloom late summer or into fall, because it doesn't make any sense to do it with our spring species. You're going to prevent the blooms if you try to do it that way. But so you're going to take the total, kind of height and size of the plant. So you've got all of its little, each each stem. Thank you. Stem. Couldn't remember the word stem. Anyway, and you're going to take each one of those and cut back by 1/3 to 1/2. You can also kind of do like a half on the stems that are on the outside and then 1/3 on the stems that are toward the inside to help kind of give it more of a rounded shape. You can just cut back, some of like the front ones or the outside ones and let the others, grow straight through. I always recommend anytime that you're doing this kind of management to keep some sort of a garden journal or make a note somewhere of what you cut, by how much and when. And then that way in the fall, if you feel like, oh, this, it didn't bloom that well, or it seemed like it bloomed late, which can happen too. It can sometimes delay the blooms. So just so you've got a record of that and know if you want to make changes for next time. So aromatic aster, I do mine May and June, or like late May, early July, something like that. But I do aromatic aster twice.
Yeah, so that'll definitely help keep the size in check during the growing season. And then for folks who are worried about it spreading, spreading volunteers in the garden, just make sure you chop once those flowers fade. You don't have to get rid of the entire plant if you want to keep some cover for wildlife, but they could chop off the seed heads and remove it. Stick them in a bag, give it to your friends because they're such a lovely plant. But I hear you, if it's not the appropriate spot for it to spread out and kind of have that nice large presence, that could be a good solution too.
Yes, absolutely. So, and with any of these, if you find of all of the things that we're talking about, purple coneflower and the aromatic aster are probably two that reseed more than the rest of the Sweet 16 list. I wouldn't say that it's particularly problematic, but especially considering that aromatic aster can get to be a bigger plant, you maybe have planted it with some space around. So yeah, deadheading or cutting off the spent flowers is a great way to prevent some of those reseeders, as would be planting pussy toes around the base of it, because they will fill in while it's maturing in those first couple of years.
That's a really great idea and a very good point, Sarah. I have one more relevant
Yeah.
question this set before we move on. Heidi's asking in regards to the coneflowers, they're having some kind of caterpillar eat theirs down to a nubbin. And Alex and I have seen this at the Discovery Center. Sarah, I don't know if you're aware of this, but and Alex, chime in into the chat if you can remember the name of this caterpillar, but it's something that I haven't seen recent until this year, but they are eating like the seed heads of these coneflowers. So I don't know that I have any sunflower moth is what Alex is saying.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, every insect has their season. I feel like Japanese beetles aren't as prolific this year, at least around where we are. So maybe this is just the year for the sunflower moth, but I don't know, people may hate or love this feedback, but plant more, just, because we are supporting our wildlife. So even if it is frustrating to lose, to have things wiped out, sometimes every season's a little different, and just we can embrace it and just continue on.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily about supporting the sunflower moth, though, like all of the pieces are key. It's about supporting the sunflower moth so we can also support things that eat the sunflower moth. You can always plant a sacrificial plant or two and move caterpillars that you find on your, on the plants that you'd like to get some blooms out of, to those. And then, as you said, sometimes there's just some seasons that are worse for things and better for others. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll let you continue.
Yeah. Okay, so our next group is Bee in a Candy Store. We've got lots of pollinator favorites here, and I love the structures of the flowers in this group. I think are all just so cool and different from each other and really interesting in their own way. So first of all, we've got pussy toes. We talked about this briefly. Again, we have the ground cover. It is evergreen. The leaves themselves stay about 1 to 3 inches, and then you have these flowers that come up in the spring and look like little cat feet, like little fuzzy cat toes. If you can't find Antonaria perlini, Antonaria neglecta is, from a design perspective, really interchangeable, and they look very similar, are going to perform the same way in the garden, happy and basically the same circumstances as well. So during the summer, you can look for American painted lady butterflies within the leaves of the pussy toes plant. Sometimes you'll find some that look like they've had like a spider web sort of wrapped around. And if you just kind of peek in there, you can find this little striped kind of dark caterpillar, and that will turn into the American painted lady butterfly. So some fun wildlife support, as well as just a great functional ground cover and early season nectar with pussy toes. And there are the leaves. So for bee balm is our next one, Monarda bradburyana. I love this flower as well. I think it looks like a Muppet head, or like a Fraggle, something like out of Jim Henson's workshop for sure. These will attract hummingbirds, as well as butterflies and bees. Things with long tongues are able to get into those kind of tubular flowers. It's a nice compact version. You may be familiar with wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, which is its like larger and rowdier cousin, but Monarda bradburyana is will take a little bit more shade than fistulosa, and is also just much more polite and sort of well behaved in the garden. It is a mint, but not an aggressive mint, but you can use the leaves for teas. Just as always with native edibles, make sure you're 100% certain on your ID before you chomp down on things. Our world milkweed here is going to add a monarch host plant. Asclepias verticulata is its Latin name. This is on its own, the individual stems may kind of look like not a whole lot, but do plan on some spread. It's going to spread vegetatively, and we want it to. In a bunch, it is a really nice and has kind of a formal bushy short shape, maybe up to 3 feet. And then with these just really interesting, the white, that classic milkweed flower shape is just so intricate and cool. And so we get those, again, monarchs. Using it as a host plant, there is some research that suggests that monarchs actually prefer these, like the finer, more delicate leaved milkweeds over like the common milkweed with a big, thick kind of leathery leaf. Next up, we have Eastern Blazing Star for late season pollinators. Again, another Muppet head that I really like. These are going to bloom later in September and October. This is the tallest plant of the Sweet 16 list, so make sure you give it some grasses and some taller neighbors to help support it, though this Blazing Star, Liatris scariosa, does stand taller on its own than some of our other tall Liatris species. We've got, again, bees, hummingbirds. The monarchs, when this blooms, will fight each other for access to nectar here. It is blooming about the time that they are coming through on their way back to Mexico in the late season. So things like really wet winters and sometimes squirrels can take their toll on Eastern Blazing Star. The squirrels like to dig up Blazing Star sometimes for some reason, and this one does not like excess moisture. So you may plan on either doing a little replanting or just, if it reseeds, allow plenty of those volunteers to stay to help make up for that. I think it's still definitely worth inclusion on the list. So we're gonna talk about Bee in a Candy Store. This design is laid out to be a border on along a fence or a foundation. It is a full sun situation, so it's not going to be too happy on like the north side of the house, but we have our tallest species in the middle and the back with the Eastern Blazing Star. We've got the pussy toes sort of starting us off and mingling in between everything else. We've got the bee balm and the world milkweed, that nice long bloom time on the world milkweed. We'll have lots of blooms as the summer goes on, hopefully see lots of caterpillars. So this, as shown here, is about 14 feet long, give or take. If your fence or foundation is longer, you want to make a longer border, you can either take where I have 3 plants and make it 5 plants, or you can repeat the groupings, or you can cut it down, whatever you need. So these are all designed to be really flexible for you. So I love this combination of plants, like I said, with just the variety in those blooms. Really cool to look at. Lots of interest there. So here are my suggestions. So as we talked about, giving the Liatris scariosa, the Eastern Blazing Star, a grass friend to help him stand up nice and tall. So I'm going to nominate Prairie Dropseed for that. And then turning again to our aromatic aster, so we get those late season pollinators and really keep the bee buffet going. And so I also want to, again, go rogue and add to the look here. So I'm choosing showy goldenrod, again, another keystone along with the aromatic aster. And those are going to be a pairing for the Blazing Star. So September through October, those are going to be blooming. They have a similar height and sort of vertical habit to them, so they look really nice together. And then I'm also going to add blue sage. Blue sage gets to be about 6 feet tall or so. It blooms August through September, so we're going to have a little bit of overlap with the milkweed and the blue sage blooming together. This is one you can Chelsea chop, but do it early. Because this, the other things that we talked about chopping start blooming fairly late, September, October. But since the sage blooms a little earlier in the year, if you're going to do it early May for sure. And again, make notes or maybe cut half of it and make sure that you do get to see some bloom still on it. So great plant, lovely blue color. popular with the pollinators. So our bee was in a candy store before. I think she's going to feel like she's in candy land now with our expanded palette. Again, we've got the tallest things in the back and the middle. We've got the prairie drop seed added. So it's going to give us that visual weight to the garden, going to give us that winter interest, that gorgeous sort of fountainy shape with the really fine leaves. Is going to be a great contrast with the leaves of the bee balm. It's going to help support the taller species that are kind of behind it. And then we've got the aromatic aster, which will do the Chelsea chop, keep it a little bushy. And we've got those sort of bookending it and sort of giving it that context on the sides. So this is our bee in Candyland design. And with that, let's get out of the sun a little bit. So we're looking at shady soft landings next. This is a group of plants put together to help you create sort of a sanctuary under your trees. So the soft landings concept, if you're not familiar with it, was introduced by Heather Holm. And basically, when we're looking at our keystone species, a lot of the best keystone species for Lepidoptera, for the caterpillars of butterflies and moths, are large trees. So we're looking at oaks, at maple, at black cherry, at hickory, those sorts of things. So if you have large trees and you've got all of these caterpillars feeding up on the leaves, most of them are not going to perform the rest of their life cycle in the tree. Most caterpillars do leave their host plant in order to go form a chrysalis or a cocoon. And so when they come down or drop down out of the tree, we want to have a hospitable place, something that's not getting mowed, something that does have some little, some habitat for them, a place for them to perform the rest of that life cycle. So that's the soft landings concept. And then this shady soft landings group is designed to help you do that. Again, another very familiar face. We have Columbine, Aquilegia canadensis. This is one that has, again, a nice long bloom time. You're having blooms from April through June. You can deadhead it to try to get some more blooms. You can also easily save and share those seeds. This is one that is also really adaptable, going basically full sun to basically full shade. You may do a little bit more water if you have it full sun, and it's probably happiest and blooms best with a mix somewhere in the middle there, maybe leaning toward the shady side of half and half. Lots of hummingbirds, of course, coming to Columbine. Of course, another one here that is widely cultivated. So I say that both so that you'll be aware that those cultivars are out there and can make informed decisions. And also, if you're just like brand new to gardening in general, just to give you some context that like the conventional, traditional, gardeners in your life, they're going to recognize and appreciate these species that you're planting, even if they're not into native plants. These are things they'll be familiar with and recognize as things that belong in a garden. So this is easily a winner. The foliage can start to look a little faded as summer goes on. So after those blooms are done, you can cut back to just a few inches, and it will kind of form a new little mound to sort of refresh it there. Next, we have alum root. I love this plant. I think this whole group is full of plants that just have this kind of ethereal, kind of floating flower feel to them. I just think it's a really, really fun group. So this is alum root. You may have seen something familiar, or something that looks similar to this, excuse me. This genus is also widely cultivated and generally called coral bells in a conventional nursery. Most of our native plant sellers refer to it by alum root, so that's what you're looking for there. The flowers here are kind of a light greenish brown. They're not super colorful, but they do just have this lovely soft texture. Get lots of tiny little pollinators coming to the tiny little flowers. I just really, really like this plant. Those little mounds of their rounded leaves are so attractive. Put them in a group. They are also pretty adaptable. Half sun to full shade. These are prairie species, but because of their short stature, they do get a lot of shade from their neighbors. So they're kind of blooming earlier, April through June, and then those leaves are shaded out by taller prairie neighbors relatively quickly. So you can kind of use that to your advantage and to your knowledge as you're deciding where to place this plant. The leaves stay semi-evergreen, so they can kind of turn reddish as the winter goes on, but I'm going to have a lot of year-round things to love about this plant. Next, roundleaf groundsel. Groundsel means ground eater, which makes it sound like, oh, I don't know, this might be aggressive, might be, you know, it's really not. It's not a scary plant at all. This is just a fabulous, it is a no-brainer for more formal native landscapes. You get all the benefits of a evergreen ground cover with this absolute riot of yellow color in the spring. It's got these little yellow groups of flowers that float about a foot or so above the leaves and just give you this cloud of yellow, which is really cool to see. Once the blooms fade, you can either cut or even mow over large groups of Pacra obovata. I don't find that it increases much from seed. So you can also let them, they look almost like little tiny, like a collection of small dandelion seed heads. But I generally find that it is going to do most of its spreading vegetatively. So it's a ground cover, it acts like a ground cover, and it's going to spread out. Your patch is going to get bigger every year. You can take a little and move it somewhere else where you want some. Super nice plant. If you have wetter areas or an area that has a bit sunnier conditions, you can substitute Pacra aurea or golden groundsel in those conditions. So you do get lots of little pollinators with this one as well. Just a super fun plant and very adaptable. It's going to help us with our weeding the same way in shadier situations as Pussy Toes does in the sun. And finally, we have a fall bloomer that does a really cool trick. So this is Dittany, Cunilla oreganoides. Oreganoides means like oregano, and it really does. The leaves look very much like our culinary oregano if you grow that in like an herb garden. It blooms late in the year. We're looking at September to October, although I have some that has not anything like what's shown in the picture here, but it is starting to bloom now and get, you know, little flowers here and there. Of this group, it does like a little more sun. So you can see there's sun to medium shade. So it will take some shade. It will take some sunnier conditions. It's probably not going to be super happy in full shade. So we're, again, going to use that knowledge when we go to lay it out. So you get little pollinators. It's great for pollinator support. And then the coolest thing I think that Dittany does is it can make frost flowers. So in the late fall, early winter, whenever we get our first few frosts, the moisture that is in the plant gets forced out through its like fibrous stems. And this is one of just a few native plants that can do this. And it makes these frost flowers. So the water comes out and freezes in these, you know, sort of wavy, ribbony forms. They can get, you know, really, really cool. And so these exist in the morning just for a little bit. Once the sun shines on them, then they're gone for the day. So this is something to enjoy just a few times a year. And so here's our shady soft landings layout. So I've made a couple of assumptions here. First, as you can see, I've designated that north is at the top of your screen, and I've clustered our Dittany in the southwest side so that it's going to get the maximum amount of that late afternoon sun, since it does prefer to be a little bit sunnier. If your situation is different, if you have like other trees that are, you know, shaded to the south and west of the tree you're planting this around, you know, kind of judge it around until you can position that Dittany where it will get the most sun and see how it does. So everything else here should be really adaptable. We've got columbine on both the top and the bottom, both the north and the south of the tree, because it can go in either place. The roundleaf groundsel is going to go everywhere eventually, which is great. It's going to find all the places that it's happy. The alum root is going to stay put, and I have it a little bit more on the northern sides, just so it doesn't get really blasted by the afternoon sun, but it's not really not a problem for it generally to do that either. This selection of plants is adaptable enough that if you were, say, planting a new keystone tree. If you're planting a new oak tree, you could plant this all at the same time as you plant the oak and probably have most of it do fairly well. And so that's very straightforward. If you're planting it around an existing tree, you do want to take care to protect the tree's roots. We're going to add a little bit of compost, not so much that we're suffocating the roots, but just a couple of inches to give us a little bit of extra leeway as we can get down in there. And most of these plants will do well both coming up from seed or spreading vegetatively. So we can get away with a smaller plant to kind of nestle in there and disturb that existing tree's roots just as little as possible. So if you would like, you can add some things to our shady soft landings to make it even better. So my first pick is bee balm again. We're going to do Monarda bradburyiana. Going to give some structural interest, some nice contrast with its leaves get kind of purpley at the edges of the season. So a nice color contrast there. And then Wild Sweet William, I am getting some vindication for. This is one that just barely missed the Sweet 16 list. I think in part because it is so popular with bunnies and rabbits as well as people, bunnies and deer as well as people. So if that is the case in your neighborhood, you may want to plant some extra or give it some protection, but it is gorgeous blooming here with the roundleaf groundsel, and it blooms late. So you also get the combination with the columbine as well. Going off book again, I've got zigzag goldenrod, which is a goldenrod that thrives in shade. Maximum size here is about 2 to 3 feet, so you don't need to necessarily do a Chelsea chop with this one. And I've also got oak sedge in part because I just love the combination of the oak sedge's like really thin bladed grass-like texture with the alum root with those circular leaves. It's just such a nice combination. Oak sedge or Carex albicans can be a little bit difficult to find in some years. So talk to your friendly native plant nursery folks about what might be a good substitute. Really just about any sedge next to alum root looks good. So you're not gonna be able to go wrong. So with that, we've got shadier soft landings. Again, we've got some columbine on the southern side of the tree. We've got some of our more shady species to the northern side of the tree. Wild Sweet William is another that can do really well sun to shade. We've got zigzag goldenrod in multiple areas. So we have that late season interest in multiple places. The goldenrod and the columbine are the tallest things here. So we're either going to cluster them toward the back or toward the trunk of the tree, or you can creatively mix them in with a bunch of shorter species, and then you have something taller that comes up. You know, from a design perspective, that's an interesting, way to do it as well. It doesn't always have to just step down, from tallest to shortest. And again, we've got the Dittany on the southwest side. I've also added the bee balm there because it is like the Dittany, one that likes a little bit more sun. So I'm trying to add it sort of out around the edges. If you have a larger tree or you want to expand this planting, you sure can. So just repeat the groupings or make bigger groupings and you can have a shadiest soft landings and just kind of keep it going, or keep it going as your tree grows as well. And our last group, Welcome Summer. So this group has just these sunny, super warm, sunny feeling to it. I love this group. Lots of pollinator support here. We have foxglove beard tongue first up, Penstemon digitalis, another familiar face that either you or your gardening neighbors will recognize from the garden store and from gardens worldwide. So again, we've got hummingbirds and pollinators coming to this. Those tubular flowers are the most fun. Make time for bumblebee butt watching with this one. They just sort of dive, headlong into there and just have their little butts kind of hanging out. So fun to watch them move from flower to flower and pollinate. Unlike most in this group, this one does like average to moist. So do kind of pay attention to that. If you've got a wetter area that you're planning this planting around, this would be good to concentrate there. Everything else that we're going to talk about in this group prefers average to dry. So kind of keep that in mind. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta. This is another keystone genus. The Rudbeckias are really important in the Great Plains region, or even if you're on the more eastern side of Missouri and sort of getting into the eastern forests, Rudbeckia remains a really important genus in that area of the country as well for keystone support. These are not long-lived as individual plants, but they do reseed. Definitely leave those seed heads up. This is another one that the birds will come to and eat. Great pollinator support here, and just this like fun sunflower energy in a small package is super nice. So do allow them to reseed and kind of move around. There's really fun to see. Another sort of June, July bloomer here, purple poppy mallow, Callerho involucrata, excuse me. This is a short and wide one. So as you can see the spread there, 24 to 36 inches, but just about 6 to 9 inches tall. It thrives in full sun. You do get pollinators coming to visit it. This is one that you can try a Chelsea chop on if you want. But for width rather than height, and kind of record your results and see what happens there. So we do tend to put purple poppy mallow at the edges of planting, so it can kind of mound, and because it's shorter, you know, we kind of think like that's where it needs to go. Do take care if you're doing that near a walkway. It will really like that hot concrete and just reach out onto the concrete, and then you have to decide, like, do I clip it? Do I let it get trampled? You know, is it a tripping hazard? That sort of thing. So I like to put this one in with taller plants and scoot it a little bit farther in to the garden, and that makes it kind of reach up through the grasses. So here's one that it can reach up through. This is prairie drop seeds, Sporobolus heterolepis. So this grass blooms August through October, like sort of late summer going into fall. And this is a bloom that is fragrant. So it is not something you would necessarily recognize as floral. Like if you smell it, you're not going to go looking for the flower that made that smell necessarily. It's a little like cilantro. People are split on it, but I don't think tempers run quite as high on prairie drop seed. But if you're, you know, planning a planting for right next to a walkway or a front door, you might go sniff it and make sure that you like it first. Go down to the Discovery Center. There's lots of it as you sort of go into the leaving the parking lot there. There's some large groupings of it where you can really get that smell. Some people think it's popcorny or like soap. I like it. I think it's nice. It has great fall color. This is sort of this tousled hair appearance that you get most of the growing season. It again starts off slow, so small clumps into this sort of raucous, really sort of fuzzy feeling. It's really nice as shown here, just on its own, or great for taller species to kind of emerge from as well. This is it going into the fall, that late summer. The seed heads really catch the light in the mornings and the evenings, and just kind of, it has this really nice like golden glow to it, which is really pretty. So here we are, welcome summer. Our three floral contributions to this design all bloom like June, July. So we're really welcoming summer. And then we've got the seed heads and the sort of later season purple poppy mallow is going to kind of keep putting on an occasional bloom here and there. And then we've got the drop seed sort of taking over the show as we go into the later summer. Again, I don't think there's a bad way to put these four plants together. You could put that purple poppy mallow in farther. It will sort of lean on its neighbors for support and reach out above, which is a really nice look in the drop seed. So really nice. But let's, you know, I'm never happy with just the four. So let's add more. So again, some other Sweet 16 members. I'm going to add pussy toes for ground cover, early blooms. I'm going to add purple coneflower. So this way we are welcoming spring with pussy toes, and we're going to welcome summer, and we're going to keep welcoming summer and keep welcoming summer as that purple coneflower just blooms for months. I'm going to also suggest that we welcome fall by adding blazing stars. So this can be Liatris scariosa, which is also on our Sweet 16 list, or you could add Liatris pygnostatia or Liatris aspera. So rough blazing star or prairie blazing star, or all three, which would give an extended bloom time. So you have August through October for that, and lots of butterfly and pollinator support. I'm going to add aromatic aster so we can welcome fall and see us on into winter, extending that bloom time. We've got late season pollinators, again, nice bushy visual weight in the garden in that late season. So here is welcome all year. We've got the tallest species in the middle. We've got the structural and contextual support of the prairie drop seed. We've got all of the interesting seed heads as we go into winter, the purple coneflower and rudbeckia seed heads are going to be really gorgeous, as well as the foxglove beard tongue has a really interesting kind of reddish seed head as well. So lots of interest all year round with this garden. And this is kind of our last of these 8 designs. And I just want to kind of say, like, feel free to play with these. If you really like this idea that's on your screen now, but maybe you're wanting to add some more host plants or to make a monarch way station, you could swap out a couple of plants. So in this case, I've added world milkweed in place of a few of the purple coneflowers. And then I also added showy goldenrod. So we add more keystone genus. We add more late season interest. We add more late season nectar and pollen resources. And so this is all, it's just a jumping off point for you. And so I hope that these are helpful. They are all available on Deep Root's website for you to download. And here are our list of 16, which I hope that this list really empowers you to add native species with confidence, and to be successful and have gorgeous functional gardens in your landscape. So it looks like we have a few minutes for questions. Sydney, shall we do some questions?
Let's do it, Sarah. Dang, girl, what an incredible presentation. And I'm impressed with our timing or your timing.
Thank you. We pulled it off.
Yes. So before we
small feat.
Yes, right. Before we dive into some questions, I just want to tell you, you got incredible feedback from our viewers. Everyone thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and commented on how beautiful and practical your designs are. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I like this. This is probably the presentation I've had the most fun putting together. And I really do love this list. I think that this is such a useful tool for beginners and intermediate gardeners alike, for folks in like commercial situations. If you have a small business and you are looking to put in a native planting, like this is a great place to start in terms of looking good, low care, great wildlife support, easy to locate. I think you can't go wrong with any of these species at all.
I know. I mean, you really can't. And I really appreciate you too pointing out that you don't just have to be a beginning gardener to appreciate this. If you already have an established garden, there's always a reason to add more native plants in my book.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, we just have a couple minutes.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
So a couple questions here. Heidi is asking, they planted a liatris that surprised them. It grew over 4 feet tall and then fell over. What can they do to plant? What can I plant among this clump that would give support to these tall stems? On one side of this clump is little blue stem.
That was going to be my suggestion. More grasses. You can, I'm trying to think of other, the aromatic aster would be a great, bushy, it's a nice thick plant for support. I think in some ways, aromatic aster might do a better job of that than little blue stem, just because there isn't as much room for like the liatris to kind of fall through it. Right. My other note would just be in terms of how old that plant is, especially prairie blazing star in its first couple of seasons gets this like real like octopus thing going on, because it does sort of like flop over and then reach for the sun and kind of flop and reach. As they get older, that tends to be less, as they have more competition from their neighbors drawing more nutrients out of the soil. They're not able to grow quite as quickly and quite as floppy. So that's something to consider as well. If your soil is like most of our garden soils, it may have previously been fertilized or just be a lot richer and a lot less competition than those plants are evolved for.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think something to keep in mind is the first couple of years, sometimes these plants get really lanky, and that's just, they're figuring things out, right? Just like the rest of us when we were growing up. Alex at the Discovery Center likes to call it the high school or the sophomore something, but we're pretty much when your arms and legs get really long and lanky and you're just kind of awkward. Happens to all of
That's
us,
funny.
right?
I like that. Yeah, I like that. That's funny. Yeah, for sure. They have an awkward adolescent phase.
Yeah, but usually after the, between 3+ years, things start to calm down, I think, in terms of everything too. But yeah, the answer is always more plants. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Okay, that was a
Always.
great question, Heidi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about pussy toes. And I think this could go on for a long conversation. I realize we have 1 minute left, so I will come back and answer this more thoroughly in the resources I send out. But their question is, would pussy toes get overwhelmed in this design? And I would just say, give everyone the appropriate space. Some plants are more demure and, prefer to be not so crowded. So you could just kind of adjust accordingly too, if you were concerned.
Yeah, it's a small, diminutive little plant. It also, like, if you think about, prairie pussy toes and, the places where it tends to grow, it does, it finds its spaces in between taller plants. It is used to, being shaded after it sort of had its moment in the spring, and then as everything, grows up around it. So it can be adaptable and flexible. But yeah, another reason to plant more of it, and so that you have its opportunity to find its little happy spot.
I love that. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for your time,
Thank
passion,
you.
and the work you do every day to promote and sustain the native landscape community and Deep Roots. And if anyone would like to learn more about Sarah's practice, please visit her online at oakandiodesign.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As I exit, I want to just tell you a couple more things going on at Deep Roots. We have our next Work and Learn on Wednesday. It's a new MDC program that we're launching. So if you want to learn alongside the experts, join us every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, where we will teach you different gardening maintenance techniques, and we'll be sure to have a fun, engaging, and educational time. For me, my goal when hosting these work days is to make sure you all feel empowered to take these skills into your own backyard. We also have our native landscape chat coming up every first Friday at 1 o'clock at the Discovery Center. Join Alex and I just for a very simple tour, but fun. We like to look at the different blooms and insects that are hanging around the grounds at the Discovery Center. And finally, Native Plants at Noon this month, we will take a live look at these plants that Sarah discussed today. So that'll be fun. Sarah, I hope you get to tune in too, so we can kind of have a play back and forth on that. So be sure to join us on August 17th. That'll be Alex Daniel, native plant nerd extraordinaire, and myself, the other native plant nerd. So without further ado, check out all of our events and our webinars online at deeproots.org. And while you're there, if you would consider making a donation, we would be grateful. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you here in a few weeks. And as always, remember, what you plant matters.